He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Hello. Hello. Oh, I'm going to have to turn the video off.
Yeah.
New Zealand talking to Samoa. The 21st century technological tyranny of distance. Broadband speed is just one of the challenges of rugby in the Pacific.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I really wanted to talk to you guys and look at you guys.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to work.
No worries.
Combine that tyranny of distance with COVID keeping Samoa's borders shut for nearly 3 years, the lack of resources for women's rugby, and the number of things women have to deal with just to be able to play the game. And you'll understand that women need to keep a sense of humour about the situation.
I hope it wasn't too much to get you guys up.
Dawn's up early, not me. you made me get dressed. I'm on leave. I'm on leave from work, so I'm not at work. So
That's why she had to come to your house. Make sure
but
you
I'm still getting texts from work.
That's Tale Anderson. You might know her as the host of RNZ's Champions of the Pacific. And she's talking to two true Pacific champions, the pioneers of women's rugby in Samoa, Dawn Rasmussen and Susan Vaunali.
I was at the National University of Samoa Faculty of Education when Susan joined us, and she came and she said, "Oh, let's start up women's rugby." And at that time I said, "Oh, that's a good idea."
Susan had already played rugby in New Zealand and Australia.
So I happened to say to her, "Hey, there's no women's rugby here. Why?" Because, you know, Samoa, it's very... Everyone knew Mano Samoa. This was 97. So, you know, the World Cup was 95 in South Africa. Everyone followed it. The Mano was there. So it's, you know, rugby is second nature over here. But there were no women playing. So that's why I said to Dawn, let's do it.
And then we advertised it, called for people to come in. We were surprised at the number of women, of the young girls who wanted to play the game. It was well over. It was over 100. It was many.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's some big numbers.
To be honest, it wasn't really hard. It was just getting people organised.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tale, did she say 100 women?
Sure did.
That's amazing. So what was the next step?
Dawn reached out to the Samoan Rugby Union development officer she knew, Waia Apelu.
Dawn said to Waia, "Hey, we're going to do a 15s team. Can you help?" And he was very supportive. So it helped having him he was our first support. And then we knew the people down at Polytech, because at that time NUS was separate to Polytech. So they said, "Oh, we'll get a team up, a women's team up, and we'll play each other." Yeah. And then the next thing we know, Waia comes to us and says that he has got a position for us to play one of the curtain raisers. New Zealand A was coming over. New Zealand A was playing the Mano Samoa at 3:00, and he'd got us the position at 12, midday, as one of the curtain raisers. And to be honest, I didn't believe him.
So they've just started a team, and almost instantly they find themselves playing a curtain raiser for the national men's side.
Yep.
I didn't believe you. I just went, yeah. There's no way that we're going to play on RP Park. No. And it turned out. And so as soon as we got that date, we talked to Polytech and we said, this game as a curtain raiser will be between us and you. So you start training and we'll start training. We had a couple of practice runs. That was fun, wasn't it? It was hilarious.
Pretty incredible, right? In the National Stadium at Apia Park.
And it was really funny because the refs, it was like, what the heck? But you know, once the refs were on board too, they understood that, we meant business. I think they thought it was going to be a joke, but, you know, we made it, I made it really serious. Our team was really serious. And as in boots, mouth guards, proper boots. So mouth guard, we got sponsored for mouth guard and proper rugby jerseys too.
On July 18, 1998.
So that's less than 25 years ago.
Yep, on an overcast day with the stiff breeze and 30-degree heat, the women of the National University of Samoa took on the women of Samoa Polytechnic, and the first official women's rugby game in Samoa was played.
It was interesting on that day when the girls went in, when they ran in onto the field, all the boo
Wow.
But when they saw the girls, passing the ball and the way they played, they were just the booing turned to cheering.
Yeah. The jeering turned to cheering. That was what we said in the end.
Yeah, that they were just, they were so surprised. There were some rugby union people that they turned around and they were saying, what on earth are you doing? Why did you bring up the women's rugby? And I said, if you're not a person who plays sports, then don't talk to me. Just let it be, and then it was really interesting how we then got a lot of support.
From what Dawn can remember, it was the National University of Samoa team that won that day.
This is Fair Game, Pacific Rugby Against the World. It's a story about rugby.
Wide to Lamu, he's got the bounce, he's handed it off his opposite.
But it's also a story about money and power.
Oh, it's not a fair game now because certainly the island nations haven't got enough money.
Sometimes they have to choose between representing their country or not being paid.
History and race.
I could never be told to piss off back to the islands, you coconut.
Is it a fair game?
When it comes to Rugby World Cups, until 2022, Samoa was the only Pacific nation to have played in the women's tournament.
In fact, countries like Kazakhstan and Scotland have played in more World Cups than any of the Pacific nations. So in this episode, we're looking at equity, equality, and passion.
In 2021, Manusina, the Samoan women's team, booked their place in the final qualification tournament for the World Cup, but they didn't get to go due to COVID restrictions and financing.
Missing out due to COVID restrictions seems a bit cruel.
Yeah, ultimately it came down to a combination of things: the pandemic, lockdown restrictions in Hong Kong, there were challenges regarding re-entry into Samoa, which included a 6-month ban for anyone who might test positive outside of the country, and then there was just uncertainty about available MIQ spaces for the 26 players returning to New Zealand, so they just weren't able to get to Dubai.
Oof, that must have hurt.
When we hear about the challenges our Pacific men's teams face, the struggles, the barriers, you multiply that and I could give you an entire series on what rugby for women in the Pacific looks like. But we've got like 45 minutes.
All right. So what have been the biggest challenges?
I mean, we did have struggles with the rugby union, but to be honest, we took no notice. We just went, oh, okay, and then we just went ahead and did it ourselves. We just did it, and we didn't need rugby union to approve anything, did we? We just went ahead and did it.
They knew people didn't want them playing. They were told they shouldn't be playing, but that didn't stop them. They had support from individuals in the union, enough women to field a team, and sure enough, a crowd curious to see whether or not they could play.
The women didn't come to rugby by themselves. They came together with older women and men, either the Ahai Matai in the village or the Whaiwhiau and his wife. They were the ones that said, okay, go and organise the women so they can play, or tell the boys they have to share the field.
Just some Samoan 101 here. The Ahai Matai is the high chief of the village and the Whaiwhiau is the minister or spiritual leader. So if these guys are supporting them, everyone in the village best be supporting them.
To be honest, the actual boys didn't really want to share the fields, but they didn't really care, really. They were quite happy, and they ended up being quite supportive of their sisters and mothers and, aunties and stuff playing rugby. So we certainly had people saying we shouldn't do it, but it wasn't really loud. Was it loud? No, we just went ahead and did it. And we had the support of the girls and their families.
It was 1924 when the men's union started, but it took 74 years after to see an official women's game on the field. Why so long?
I think we're just trying to get people to accept the women playing rugby here in Samoa. But by then we started having, people beginning to accept it and to see that we were getting international competitions and that we were being recognized internationally. And that was really, really good. And also was, again, and also then our bonding with the members in New Zealand, the Samoan women's rugby in New Zealand.
It's 2002 and Samoa have qualified for their first ever Women's Rugby World Cup.
My parents are very proud, especially my dad, because we come from a rugby family. So in Samoa, so lots of us played for the village, your village. But I had a couple of uncles that played for Manu Samoa or Samoa back in the day. So to have his daughter playing, his only daughter playing for Samoa, they're very proud parents and but very supportive too.
We're in Auckland, New Zealand at the Otahuhu rugby fields, talking to Molia Ngā Tele, Nua Folau, Alai Sala Te Maota, Bekulich Leavasa, best known as Ala, Samoa's most capped women's rugby player with 14 test caps for Manusina.
Did I hear right? She's the most capped player.
Yep.
With only 14 caps.
Yeah, 14 caps over 15 years, which says a lot about where the women's game is compared to the men's. And for a Samoan woman wanting to play the game for her home, her culture, it came with a lot of sacrifices.
For me, it was, I think this is time away from family, the every day where you're spending lots of your time training in between work or study, and trying to find that balance. I had one where I was really I had to take a year off school. I woke up to attend, it was my goal.
Ella's 43 years old and she was born in Samoa, but migrated to New Zealand with her parents and 4 siblings in the early 80s. She began playing rugby in Year 10 while attending Marcellin College, but graduated from Epsom Girls Grammar School the year they formed their first rugby team.
Oh my God. It's okay. And, I had to take a whole year off school because I had to be away. I was going to be away for 6 to 7 weeks, and school, they wouldn't let me come back and continue my schooling because a lot of the stuff that I would miss was all practical work, which I had to be there to learn and to pass. So that was one. It was quite hard because that delayed me from graduating from school. Wow. But I wouldn't change it for anything because I got to get to the World Cup and I achieved my goal of making the squad and putting on that jersey. But that was one that was really hard.
She made over 50 appearances for 3 different teams in New Zealand's domestic rugby competition since the early 2000s. She also played for the World 15s team, and she's still in the game as the team's physio.
It's special representing any country, I think. But when you do play for Samoa and I suppose any Pacific nation, our struggles to get there are enormous.
It's The Undertaker.
Yep, this is Taua Nu'u Nick Bekulich, long-time supporter, manager of the women's team and Ella's husband.
And he's the Undertaker. There's a South Auckland rule that you have to mention Nick Bekulich is the Undertaker.
If only people knew the struggles that people do have to go through. And largely, we're amateur. Women have to juggle their jobs, their study, some who have children, women who are largely responsible caregivers for members of their family, and spending that amount of time away, and then also the pressures of how you're going to pay your rent or your mortgage. and then putting in the whole physical effort of trying to be as fit as you can.
So when you put this all together to the moment where they're lining up to sing the national anthem, it's a huge moment. One where women can say, I've done it, I've made it. And the result on the field isn't necessarily how you measure their success, because they're on the global stage having achieved something with very, very little resource and very, very little support.
Galofa. Ala was crying there, wasn't she?
She was. And so you'll probably find that's why a lot of the women get very emotional when they talk about their journey.
Just putting on the jersey and knowing that, oh my God, that you're representing not only yourself, your family, your village, but all of Samoa. And I think and I've represented at 3 World Cups.
It's quite emotional.
It is. Oh my God.
But it just shows how special and how...
Yeah. And you don't, especially now you don't realise it, but when you reflect and think about it, like just all the sacrifices you had to go through to get to those points, and every World Cup that I've been to have been really special.
You cannot underestimate how emotional a moment this is for those Samoan players out there, those Samoan supporters in the stands, and for Samoans all around the world as well.
Earlier we heard from Dawn and Susan about the support for women's rugby on the island. Turns out attitudes went very different in New Zealand.
And again, whether or not the rugby field was the place for women was obviously a discussion at the time. And I think some of the attitudes were certainly, we would probably find quite unacceptable today. There were views that women who played rugby were overweight, toothless, and just drank beer, which was far from the truth.
Any thoughts, James?
Nope. I'll let Nick fly solo on this one.
I think we're just in such a good space now where there's a lot of acceptance, and for the sheer fact that women rugby players are genuine athletes who have been able to show how good they are at the game of rugby. And globally you can see it.
Good save, Nick Bakulic. Safe.
It would have been a good save if he didn't keep going.
We actually had a lot of really committed players back then, and at that time, the pool of players that we had, rugby was quite a priority. And I think we were pretty fortunate in the early 2000s that we had women who lived and breathed rugby. I think it's a little bit different nowadays. I think you don't get that same kind of commitment. But certainly a lot of the campaigns were run on a small of an oily rag and on a wing of the prayer.
So it's a bit of the old back in my day, run on a smell of an oily minority rag and a wing and a prayer. In other words, no money, no resources, and again, very little support for the women's game.
Yeah, I think the fact that around the resources, you probably would have found going back 20 years ago that women's teams were normally given the hand-me-down gear from the boys. And then you find yourself going away on a tour and the girls looking like astronauts.
Now a stick and a run from Ufanga, the captain. Up the park she goes. Strong run from the centre. She has some support, decides to keep going. Ufanga still going down the sideline. Brilliant run. What a try for Tonga. Opening try of the Oceania Women's Team.
The idea of having a women's team was brought to the union, and it wasn't really a committee it's just the development officer at that time just called for whoever collect a couple of girls who ever wanted to play rugby, and I was one of them.
This is Vehoko Tuavai. She's the vice chair of the Tonga Women's Rugby, responsible for the women's game in Tonga, and has been involved since their first team was established way back in 2006.
I remember when we come down to training, they was just say, you're going to be the first Tonga national women's team and represent Tonga then. And then just a couple of weeks before the game start.
Just remember we're talking about Tonga here, not Samoa, but it's a similar situation.
But they didn't give us much time to prepare, so the calling up the squad, it wasn't really the normal procedure for a national team to have an actual squad and then training and preparation, all that. But then back then we just thought that that's the normal of a rugby team.
Tonga played their first international test match against Fiji in 2006 at the Women's Pacific Tri-Nations. While the game seemed to be growing for women in Samoa and Fiji, and we'll hear from Fiji shortly, the game for Tongan women stalled, and it took 10 years since that first team was put together before women's rugby was established under the Tonga Rugby Union.
At that time, in 2016, I found out there should be a Tonga women's rugby can form a committee or association under the umbrella of Tonga Rugby Union. So I went ahead, I grabbed a couple of women that they keen to help out, to support starting this committee. And then we started the first Tonga Women's Rugby Association on the 29th of February 2016.
Now, that all sounds positive, but then 2 years later, this happened.
Critics have been swift to condemn Tonga's Education Ministry after it told a school not to let female students box or play rugby. The ban comes from the belief by some government officials that women competing in such sports goes against Tongan customs.
In 2018, a letter from the Ministry of Education informed staff at Tonga High School that girls shouldn't be playing such sports because it goes against young women's dignity and Tongan culture and traditions.
Tonga's Prime Minister at the time quickly reversed the decision after there was outrage from the public and fans. But what role do culture and traditions have when playing the game?
I know culture is really strong here in Tonga, traditional culture. But for us, but because rugby is one of the, as I said before, it's a popular sport for Tonga. It's starting to be normal for women too.
By normal, wehoko means accepted. But accepted by who?
What we did when the minister banned the rugby, it didn't stop us because we still reached the girls through community.
Is it a fair game?
As we heard in the last episode, much like the Fiji men's, the Fijiana are on the rise when it comes to women's rugby.
Lueningila to Rocco Uono. A new champion is crowned in the Super W. The Fijiana and Drua etched their name and nation into women's rugby history here in Australia.
In 2019, they qualified for the World Cup for the first time. In 2020, the Fijiana Sevens took home bronze at the Olympics. Then the Fijiana took silver at the Commonwealth Games, and the Ndrua won the Australian Super W in their debut season.
You know, I was asked after the Olympics, what it feels like winning the bronze medal.
This is Vela Nauthu-Kiri, Women's Development Officer for Fiji Rugby Union.
I said we were expecting to reach the podium. We were expecting to get there, win a medal. But to me, I broke down after the match when we were back at the village, when my messenger was flooded with videos of male cheering for us. That was the turning point. To me, that was the biggest achievement, because it took me about 20 years trying to change mindset. More than 20 years for women's rugby, more than 20 years to change mindset.
She's worked in rugby for more than 20 years, starting as a senior writer for Devovo Rugby magazine.
I ended up being an administrator because that's the only way I can contribute to rugby. But then when become part of rugby, I saw something different. It can change you in the sense, because I think it's because it's a space where it's for men. It changes you to adapt into that space. So you, as a woman, for me, I'm just talking about myself. I'm not sure about the other women. I can only talk about myself. You get to do extras. I have to learn more to be accepted into that space.
Women understand and know how admin works in the Pacific, but whether it's on the field or in the office, they're still having to prove they deserve to be in these positions.
You have to be very aggressive. You have to know your thing. You get those criticism always, but how you handle it I look at it from a women perspective, and it's a space where you can actually, when I was working, that's a space where I can distress, and I can just scream and shout and just tackle when I'm angry. The pressure from work, the pressure from relatives, the pressure from your friends, the pressure from your boyfriends, I think that helped me too for this role.
For women in Fiji, rugby is about breaking down barriers. It's about having a space where they can be authentically them, a game that offers more than what you see on the field.
Everybody's going through some kind of thing, and they chose rugby to become their safe haven. So that kind of pushed me to use the sport to change lives. It did for me. It changed me to come out of my shell. I can be very aggressive. I can be very stubborn, but I'm very fragile.
Tali, I've never thought about rugby as a safe haven. It seems while there's been progress at what might seem like a rapid rate for women in Fiji, it's taken some time to get to a somewhat level playing field, right?
Right. Just like we've heard from Samoa and Tonga, and to be fair, women's rugby around the world, look at the Black Ferns, they've only been around for 30 years. Women have had to prove they deserve to be there.
So what is it that Fiji are doing differently? Is it just to do with that their population size, and non-Pacific people might not know this, being 5 times that of Samoa and Tonga, or is it just the funding that comes with a larger economy?
I think it's the organisation. Fiji have both a 15s and 7s program dedicated for women, and while there are players that they draw from overseas, the majority of them are homegrown and have international experience.
And you see, rugby has existed for more than 100 and something years, but women's rugby just less than 30 years. So it's and we've exploded in a very short while, but then again, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
When I hear about the progress that women's rugby has made in Fiji, Vala's name is almost always mentioned. She describes herself as an introvert, but she's also someone who's brave, who knows her stuff. She stands in her ground and she can give it back. And she's also someone who has helped develop the women's game.
Game time, let's go! Fijiana here. They're going to win it themselves. Marini scores it. Vitalini. Marini. And Fijiana are going to win the Oceania Women's Championship.
Fiji are the benchmark in the Pacific now, and for teams wanting to follow in their footsteps, how do they get there?
It's not about increasing the women's number. It's not about getting competition with other sports. It's how rugby can help women, how we can contribute to the community, how we can help with the SDG, how we can advocate on educating more women, on empowering more women. I think that's the secret that I've been using for the number of years that resulted in now I can control the number of girls.
in our culture, girls, that's unheard of. Girls don't do that. Girls, you leave that to the boys. The girls just do all the fe'aus, the things that girls should do, but playing rugby isn't one of them.
We're back in Otahuhu, South Auckland, with Manusina team physio and 14-cap veteran, Alapa Kulich.
So especially back in Samoa, because in that team that we had back in the year 2000, there was a lot of the girls were from, I think all of us were from New Zealand-based girls that went to Hong Kong and played for Samoa.
We heard from Tonga earlier about how rugby was banned because girls shouldn't be playing such sports and it goes against young women's dignity, Tongan culture and traditions. But what does that mean exactly? And what role does culture play when it comes to sport?
The Samoan culture is similar to other cultures where roles and tasks and expectations, it's gendered. Of course it's gendered. It's gendered. For Samoan culture, it's location, age, and gender, in that order, really. Yeah.
This is Susan again, going off in Samoa.
I think, of course, the initial thought was it's only for men, and we went, I don't think so, and they went, okay then, but you might get hurt. It was sexist because it's role. You have gendered roles, but those things change all the time.
Tale, would you call this sexist?
Yes, I would. But this isn't only happening in the islands. Things are going at different paces in different places. And in the Kingdom of Tonga, the journey has been a long and slow one. Listen to Wehoko here.
There's lots of challenges we face here in Tonga. No one knows, but every time we call the media, we try to stay positive. That's the only way we can move us. We can bring back the negativity and yeah.
Look, it's important to understand that for Pacific women, they can't just think about what they're doing or saying, but how those things will be interpreted. There's weights on weights.
The challenges the most challenges that we face that the men's controlling everything, and even when it's come to sharing the opportunity of teaching our women to know how to lead and to look after rugby, like example, to have a development officer for women. Our last rugby union board, they never accept us in as a part of. Every time I go to the office, I fight with them. I fight with them because I want them to know that we have a voice.
It doesn't sound like there's much hope.
No, there is. It's been bleak, but we've just seen development teams from Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, the Cook Islands and Papua New Guinea come over ahead of the World Cup. That wouldn't have happened 10 years ago.
We have lots of milestones. Just from 2020 to 2021, they put us as an observer in the main board, in the main Tonga Rugby Union board. So that was the first milestone for us, that we are inside the board, even though we are observer, but we're sitting there and hear all the decision, and we can negotiate things for us.
And she told me they've got support from the new CEO and management.
We're talking about the Australian CEO in charge of Tonga here, right?
Right.
So are things getting any better for Tonga, and how can we help them?
Well, in August, Oceania Rugby launched a program in partnership with the Australian government's Pacific Sports to positively impact gender equality across the region.
Well, that sounds awesome. What does it mean exactly?
Fiji, Samoa, Solomon Islands and Tonga will receive funding to provide women with opportunities both on and off the pitch. They say the project will lead to more opportunities for women in leadership roles while making sure there's pathways for players to develop in each country.
But is that really going to make a difference? I mean, we've just heard the women in Tonga are fighting to be heard.
Yeah, it's tricky. They say the process of appointing women to new full-time positions in senior management is underway, but I've been watching and waiting and I'm not convinced yet.
Okay, so what would you need to see?
I mean, if a country like New Zealand struggles to get just 4 women on their board, even where they're enticed by hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential funding, once again, I'm just not convinced. And then there's the domestic pathways and competitions which need to be strengthened.
So where are they now in terms of competing both at a domestic and international level?
It's been a tough few years for those in Tonga who have faced, the volcanic eruption and tsunami at the end of 2021. And then there's COVID. Not to mention rugby in Tonga as a whole has its issues.
I do feel like World Rugby should have a special apocalypse fund for when you have 3 massive disasters in a year.
Yeah, they can play in Oceania rugby tournaments, but local girls need competitions to compete in on island to make the national team. And when I spoke to Whihoko last year, there had been no women's 15s competition for close to 3 years. She told me they have the numbers to play with more girls and women wanting to participate. They've also got support from those driving the game for Tonga and New Zealand as well, which saw them finish 3rd in the Oceania Championship in July. 9 of those players from the island, some from Australia, USA, and the rest from New Zealand.
So where to for them?
Whihoko said Fiji is leading the way.
We look at Fijiana as encouraging us to get up and follow their pathway and follow their program, so we can see if we can grow ours into a level, the same level as Fijiana. And I know Samoa is on the right path now because they were in the qualification too. But then only Fiji made it through. But I think for Samoa and Fiji, we're trying to head in the same program and same strategy that Fiji and Samoa are using.
So like with the men's game, it's Fiji that the other Pacific teams are following.
Sure, but what appears to hamstring both Samoa and Tonga is a lack of willingness to fund the women's game from what's already a small pot.
Yeah, the challenges, I suppose, whilst we'll always struggle with the corporate dollar with our Pacific nations. Then once you go down, from your what people perceive as the main team, and then anything underneath that, we certainly had to. We were already fighting for crumbs. We were fighting for the crumbs of the crumbs.
Do you think the same intensity now goes into the women's space as it does into the men's space?
If you're talking about Samoa, no.
Yeah.
No, because if you look at the funding, World Rugby funds X amount of management to be on the team, and 9 times out of 10 we would just fill those gaps. Because we simply don't have the money to have extra staff. I mean, we'd love to, but again, who's going to fund it? And unless we've got that corporate dollar to support us, you would find that most management teams are made up of the numbers that are funded by World Rugby.
Nick makes a good point. Women need more investment if we want to see changes in the Pacific. And Ella explains how that feels.
Yeah, so you're there, but it's not like you're kind of like in the background, like you're just like a tick box, really. But I mean, since 2018, since Samoa, our women's rugby has been when it started restart. Hey, we had to restart back in 2018.
Time out.
Sorry, the restart of women's rugby in Samoa? What does she mean by that?
She means the 2017 Women's Rugby World Cup. Oceania Rugby denied Samoa entry into the Oceania qualifiers because they didn't meet the criteria. There was no domestic competition for women at the time on island.
So there was a team prepared to go, but there was no local competition?
That's right. But keep in mind, though, a large number of those players would have been New Zealand-based players.
Well, how did the Samoan-based players or even the local union feel about that?
Well, in particular with New Zealand, the Samoan team, at first it was like we had a little bit of differences where the ones in New Zealand kind of looked down on us.
We're back in Samoa with Dawn Rasmussen.
It takes me to the time where we were invited to go to Hong Kong, and I wanted a player from Samoa to go together with the coach, just to go to be part of it, but they didn't want it.
So just to be clear, the invitation for Samoa to attend the Hong Kong Sevens went to those in charge of Samoa women's rugby in New Zealand.
Yeah, that's probably not going to end well.
Here's what Susan Faungali remembers.
So what we found out when we started women's rugby here is that, because back then it was a Hong Kong Sevens, there was no international circuit. What we found out was that the invitation for Samoa for women's rugby, for example, at the Hong Kong Sevens and at some other ones, the invitation for Samoa went to New Zealand. And New Zealand said, yeah, we'll do it because we've got all the Samoan girls, and they did it. And so when we started in Samoa, we went, I don't think so.
This is similar to what happened with the men's game. Before rugby went professional, you could only trial for Manu Samoa by being in Samoa. You had to physically go there if you wanted to play for them.
I think I was the one that was more annoyed, but Dawn was a lot more patient, a lot more patient and open. But I just went, no, it was okay in the past because there was no women's rugby here. Now we have women's rugby. We have a season. We have a da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That if Samoa gets invited anywhere for women's rugby, 7s or 15s, it's us that goes. And we choose who goes, not them. So, of course, they didn't like that.
Is there a balance, or should there be, when it comes to representing your heritage?
Women's rugby in Samoa is for women in Samoa, not for women in New Zealand. And that was the stance of the Manu Samoa years ago. You could only try that, and then you could only trial for Manu Samoa by being in Samoa. So you couldn't trial from overseas before the whole professional thing. You had to come to Samoa and trial to be in the Manu Samoa team. And our position was the same. My position was the same. I think that's one of the only arguments we had, me and Dawn, actually. Do you remember that? Yeah. We didn't argue very much, but that's what we argued about. And I'm the New Zealand born, and I'm the one that's saying, no.
And I'm the Samoan one.
And you're the Samoan one saying, I think we should give them a chance. I went, no, they can go and play in New Zealand. We need to do Samoan girls.
Let me get this right. Susan, who was born in New Zealand, thinks the team representing Samoa should be based in Samoa, while Dawn, who is Samoa born, thinks there should be more of a mix.
Right.
Okay. Look, I'm not getting between an auntie argument. What's your take on it?
I'll leave it to them.
No, I was just saying, it's always good to have a combined one because we have some very good New Zealand ones and we've got some good ones here. And if you want to get into the World Cup or into a higher position, you have to merge them together. It's almost the same as the Manu Samoa and the All Black their players. Now I'm glad that they're allowing the Pacific Island people to go back and play for their teams. But it was New Zealand, that because to get them together, and it will also build up the strength and the talent of our local ones.
My position right from the beginning was that we started women's rugby for women in Samoa. So my objective was not to get to the World Cup and win the World Cup. Gosh, it's nice if that happened, but that wasn't my objective. My objective was to bring women's rugby to the women in Samoa.
I think that is something that gets lost at the higher levels of sport. These people who are starting teams, starting unions, trailblazing the game in countries, they're really doing it for the love of the game.
We've got some of our girls here are doing amazing things for sports for women in Samoa. So they've just, because, representing your country is a whole new kettle of fish that is opened. But New Zealand does have a habit of not just rugby, I might add, but trying to represent Pacific Islands when they're not. They're New Zealand.
I don't want to be responsible for the second argument.
Don't worry. We've got more things to worry about. But anyway, that's what I mean. We have different things.
I feel like the UN needs to hire Dawn and Susan as conflict negotiators.
True. With a New Zealand view, here's the Undertaker, Nick Bakulich.
Well, I think we've got a far better relationship now, and I think over the last 5 years, we've seen a lot more collaboration. Because at the end of the day, we all need each other. Mm-hmm. We all represent the one team, and I think there's a really good spirit within the girls that we've had the last 3 years. So whether or not they're Samoa based or they're from Australia. Or in the United States or New Zealand, there's just a real spirit of collaboration and the world that we actually need each other to succeed.
International listeners will know that diaspora dialogue is not just a Pacific issue, but it really does complicate any discussion around representation, and not just on the field.
Like I said before, there's hope, optimism even, and pathways for women to play in the game is better. Here's Ella.
I'm just in awe of all the opportunities that the girls have now that we didn't have back then. We would love to have contracts or, get paid to play the game that you love, and being able to travel overseas and play for, different clubs overseas and what they have now, and just a lot of the rugby tournaments that they have now. But back then, there was, you only played for your club, and then if you made the rep team, and that was basically it, really.
There's an increase of support and participation amongst the women's game across the Pacific, in Samoa, Tonga and Fiji at least. New competitions like Super Rugby Aupiki have landed on New Zealand shores, while Fijiana have been included in Australia's Super Rugby W.
Okay, but finish this sentence. The sleeping giant that is Pacific women's rugby has
barely woken from their sleep.
It's about time. It's about time that they've had the Super Rugby for women. There's lots of us, play the game and represent different regions. But it's very exciting.
It's another pathway.
Yeah.
And it's another dream come true, really. For those who have been around long enough in the women's game.
And while the new eligibility rules, which you've covered in other episodes, is a major positive for the sport, Nick Bakulich has found a problem which highlights one of the major development issues.
But eligibility is a very interesting component in itself, because you would be very surprised the amount of players who don't understand the eligibility rules, and that's an interesting study in itself. Where players didn't know about the One Nation rule.
So not everyone understands the rules, but for those who do...
even though the men's are excited, but we're even more excited because it's just our playing pool has just increased, because, those who may have only put on the black jersey, the Black Ferns jersey or even... Singapore, we had one that played for Singapore, and now excited because now they've had that time lapse between the last time they played and now they were putting their hand up to represent.
Well, it feels, just as with the men's sides, that fans can get revved up to see what their Pacific teams can do with a fully souped up roster.
Honestly, James, I feel like it would be a disservice for our Pacific nations not to be hopeful for the women's game, as if optimism is what is keeping them sustained. I don't even think passion does justice to what I got from these interviews. They just want the opportunity to show what they do. These women just want to play this game that they love, that their family loves. That's all they want to do. And the fact that they can have the same love, same passion, same spirit for rugby that the men do, and it's just 1,000 times harder, it's not right, James. It's just not right. And remember, for the opportunities of having New Zealand and Australian domestic competitions, there's also dangers there too. where players who would otherwise have chosen to play for their Pacific national squads could instead make themselves eligible for New Zealand.
I would probably think at this early stage of the eligibility change that it would probably almost be against the spirit of the change if New Zealand started looking at players who have already played for Pacific nations.
We've got the Moana Pasifika team for the men's. Would you like to see a Pacific team for the women's as well?
Yes, that'd be so good if we have a Moana Pasifika team. Just imagine if we did, eh? But that, that would be awesome if we, down the track, we would love to have a Moana Pasifika women's team.
That's the next step.
That's the next step.
Absolutely. Written and produced by James Nokise, Tale Anderson and John Daniel for Bird of Paradise Productions, Radio New Zealand and Pacific Media Network. Language Program Director, Matt Tufunga. Executive Producers for RNZ, Justin Gregory, Katie Gossett and Tim Watkin. Sound Engineers, Rangi Poick, Alex Harmer and Jeremy Ansell for RNZ, Harrison Edwards at PMN. Music and Sound Design, Anonymous, Faumu Mafu Salapo. Visuals, Manatoa Productions, Anonymous, and Krista Barnaby for RNZ. Additional reporting by Life Mavono. Additional sound recorded by Rudy Bartley at WT Media in Samoa. Special thanks to Don Mann, Louis Villasoni, Langipoiva, Cheryl Jackson, Jody Hoane, Josie Campbell, Elijah Fa'afio, and Ingangaro Whakafi. Thanks to Sky Sport, TVNZ, TV3, and Discovery for game audio from TV broadcasts. RNZ Commissioning, Jody Hoane, Tim Burnell. RNZ Acting Head of Content, Veronica Schmidt. RNZ Interim Chief Content Officer, Megan Whelan.